everybody wants to talk about what AI is missing, right, in this conversation. Like, right, I've talked about it now on the other podcasts I do. Every other episode we're talking about, like, what does AI not achieve, right? Like, what does AI not do? And it's always kind of like this ubiquitous, like, kind of vague soullessness that we talk about, right? Whether it's it generating music, whether it's the images that it makes, whether it's the text that it writes by itself, like, it's missing something, right? And I think Brooks kind of really starts to get to it, which is that it doesn't, as he puts it, hunger. It doesn't desire. It doesn't know its purpose. It doesn't have a purpose. Like, it doesn't have motivation and joy and all of that wrapped into one. It doesn't really understand why it's doing what it's doing beyond that it was asked to do it.
It doesn't have a vocation.
So, yes, it doesn't have a calling. What is up, folks? Welcome to FaithWorks Lancaster, our Conversations on Calling podcast. If you're hearing my voice right now, my name is Josh. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast. If I wasn't, it'd be weird. I'm talking to you right now. That would be kind of strange, but you know, such is life. That small giggle working from a robot office was my co-host, Eric. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
Hi.
Yes, I said giggle, and I don't take it back. No. No, welcome.
I'm all right with that.
We're happy to start another week here on the FaithWorks podcast. Before we get too far into things, just a reminder: if you're listening to us and you haven't subscribed anymore, stop doing that. That's rude. Make sure and go subscribe to the podcast. You can find us anywhere: YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, at FaithWorks Lanc. Just make sure you find us there. Go hit that bell, subscribe, whatever other fun icon the tool you're in has chosen to do that in. Just do that. That'd be super cool. We'd appreciate it. It'd be awesome and super fun. And also, if you'd like to check out stuff, because I never forget to say this, because Eric makes it, and so we got to make sure we say it. We do have a website, faithworkslanc.org. It's pretty cool. Go check it out. There's always an episode page tied to the episode. And you can listen to us there or wherever you'd like to listen to us. For anybody listening, we appreciate it, and it's great. So yeah,
and I'd like to add on the webpage, sometimes you get links to resources that don't appear anywhere else.
Oh yeah.
So know,
little tidbits.
Yeah,
if you will.
Yeah, little gifts. Easter eggs.
Little Easter eggs.
Yes, let's not talk about Easter, but let's talk about, well, firstly, the beginning of the school year, right? So everybody who has listened to us for more than one episode knows that in one form or another, Josh and I both work in higher ed, Christian higher ed specifically. And while that's not everyone's experience, what we do have pretty common experience of is the start of the school year, right? And so as Josh and I think about the start of an academic year, and especially folks going off to college for the first time, you know, probably almost every Christian 18-year-old gets a version of the same talk before they leave for college, at least, especially if they're not going to an explicitly Christian college. Sometimes even then, though, too. A youth pastor, a parent, could be a paperback book with a stock photo on the cover. This is the advice they get. Find a church your first week. Find a roommate who'll keep you honest. Guard your habits. Come out on the other side with your Christian faith intact. There's a lot of kind of fear and anxiety around this, and and to some extent with good cause. I don't mean to make a complete light of this, but there are a few things baked into that talk. The environment is hostile, may be the case. You're entering into it for a fixed season. You're not always going to be there, and the goal is to survive it. Okay. There is some truth to all of that, okay? That's going off to college. But when you start your job, nobody gives you that talk on your first day. That job lasts for maybe 40 years. Aside from death or retirement, there's no other side to come out on, okay? So here we are. As adults, welcome to the rest of your life.
Masses, Eric Brandt.
And this is nobody gives us that talk, right? So I was just thinking about how I feel badly for all of us who are kind of beyond that college experience, and now we're looking at the rest of our professional lives. And nobody gave me that talk. How to stay Christian. maybe even how to stay
Yeah.
human at work.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, nobody gave me that talk either, and so this is really the question we got before us today, which I know is going to come as a surprise in the FaithWorks podcast because clearly we don't talk about faith and work. It's not in the name. Uh, what does it take to stay Christian at work? Right now that the machine can do a good deal of thinking for you, AI is in this world specifically, and we think answering that runs straight through a second question that the college version never had to ask, which what does it take to stay human at work, right? Not just what does it take to be Christian at work, but what does it take to be a human and Christian at work? And I think we're going to talk a little bit about how those turn out to kind of be one project in the same as we're engaging in work. So, one caveat here before we start: honestly, we're probably going to be talking a lot about knowledge work today. That's a lot of where Eric and I's backgrounds come from. It's a lot of where the author that we're kind of basing and kind of interacting with, he's not actually on the podcast. So if you'd like to join, just jump in, my friend. We
We
don't
will leave
pay.
you silent. We will leave you unnamed for the moment.
Yeah,
But
we'll leave you unnamed for the
we'll say
moment.
who you
Let
are.
me jump in. Yeah. So there's gonna be a lot of conversation about desks, documents, emails, analysis, meetings, pivoting. I don't know, whatever else things we talk about in knowledge work. The so the trades, farming, healthcare, teaching, some of that background that we talked about in other episodes, probably not going to be as prevalent in this episode. But we think each one deserves its own conversation. And honestly, some of what we're talking about in this episode will have some impact to this, right? AI, especially, is going to be a focus in this topic today, and it impacts a lot of things, not just knowledge work, right? But when we're talking about knowledge work, if that's your work or it's close to it, just stay with us through here, no matter where you're coming from, because we'll get to an episode about AI and how it ties to there. But today we're going to be talking a little bit more about knowledge work and asking that question: what does it take to be Christian and human at work, and how are those two things tied together?
Especially in this age of AI. And that's where the essay that we're going to kind of use as the frame for our conversation comes in. So, back in June, just a couple months ago, David Brooks, who was a longtime New York Times opinion writer, now writing for The Atlantic, has written a bunch of books, especially in the last few years, on character development. He's been one of my favorite authors. He has also been tracking kind of what's going on in the AI space and brings a lot of careful thought to this conversation. He's not kind of a fear mongerer, but he also has some real concerns. And so back in June, he had an essay come out. Depending on when you might have seen it, it's got two different titles here. The first is there are 3 types of AI users. It also circulated under the name The People Who Will Thrive in the AI Age. And so what I'm going to do here first is kind of unpack what those AI types are so that you can benefit without actually having read the article yourself. Though, again, I recommend it in June in the Atlantic. So there are 3 types, David Brooks says, of AI users. I'm going to name them and explain a little bit, and then we're going to use them as the basis for the rest of our conversation here. So the first group is what he calls the productive passengers. Okay, let think about that for a moment here. Okay, what he says is this is the group
good Baptist. That has, he's got some alliteration in that one.
Yes, he's got 3 points. He's got 3 points, right? Okay, so there are 3 types.
Man, nailed
right?
it. Okay.
Yes. As far as I know, David Brooks is not a Baptist, but he's acting like a good one. So what he says is this is the group that has low need for cognition. Okay, it's kind of a rude thing to say to anybody, but they're going after AI to use it so that they can think less. And actually, to quote from Brooks, he says this: their great gain is that AI will make them more productive because it makes tasks so easy. Their great loss will be that AI will diminish their mental capacities because it makes tasks so easy. All right, so the simplicity of tasks, simplification of tasks is one going to make them more productive, but it's also going to reduce their mental capacities. But they might be okay with that because these are the productive passengers. The second group are the reluctant optimizers. I think this type of AI user is probably going to resonate with a lot of people here. He says this is the group that has sort of a medium need for cognition. They see the kind of this hollowing out coming of our mental capacities and faculties, and they resolve, he says, earnestly and with good intentions to resist it. Right? They're not gonna succumb to this. They're not just gonna become productive passengers. But then, in the crowded and stressful rush of everyday life, he says, they will get sucked in. Okay, so these are the reluctant optimizers. They are concerned about what's coming. They realize there's need to engage. They come in with good intentions. They're going to hold fast, but then just because of pace of their job type, of their own personal circumstances, they're going to succumb to this, and really kind of become productive passengers who are maybe disgruntled about the fact that they're passengers. That's my terminology for it. And then, but there's a third group, and the first two, if they don't sound compelling to you, that's because there's a third one here, and these are the mental marathoners. Brooks says these are the folks that have a high need for cognition. And here's his quote, and I think this is a great example here. The automobile is a perfectly good technology for traveling 26.2 miles. Josh and I were talking before about this, and neither one of us are runners or marathoners.
So
I assume this is the length of a marathon.
Yeah. Or just like he's really passionate about 26.2 miles. It's just that
yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, that aside, the fact that we don't know what a marathon length is, but we suspect now it's 26.2 miles, that the automobile is a great technology for traveling a distance. Because of that, there is no practical reason that any person should train themselves to run that distance. But some people do. These are the folks who are going to put in the hard work, the hard effort. They're going to do it not because they have to, but because they want to, right? And kind of what he's arguing in this is that we should be in that position. We should be the mental marathoners. We should look to cultivate our skills, our intelligence, even our wisdom, because he's arguing that in the age of AI, this will set us apart. And he's written this across a number of essays in the last couple of years. Another great quote he has is, when intelligence is plentiful, volition is valuable, right? Okay, so when artificial intelligence, human intelligence, it's all available. What we do with our wills, what we choose to do, is going to be particularly valuable, perhaps even more so than it is now. Also addressing some of that especially that first type, he says that people with kind of a cultivation mindset, who want to make themselves better, who want to understand their place in the world and their work and their contribution, they're going to seek friction. They're going to seek hard things. That resonates, I think, for Josh and me, being learning designers and teachers as well. You want there's a desirable difficulty there. And so he's saying this is a cultivation mindset that seeks friction. But people who have what he says is an optimization mindset want their life to be frictionless. And for them, AI is going to, in many ways, make it frictionless. So he's saying this is a choice for us, which one of these user types we are when it comes to AI. And one thing, just to throw this out there early on, this is very interesting, that kind of challenges some assumptions around AI. ActiveTrack, they have analyzed the digital activity of more than 10,000 workers, and they have found that after AI adoption within their workplace, their time on email, messaging, chat, all those sorts of communications have more than doubled, and business software rose 94%. The usage of these tools increased. So the finding here is that as the tools got adopted, the work got heavier. So as AI was being used more, the work didn't get lighter or easier. It actually grew. Yikes.
Yep.
So that's the quick kind of recap of the article.
Yes, and I want to mention here real quick, and we'll get into this more as we discuss and kind of talk questions, but what's interesting about those findings is none of us should be surprised by those findings. I've talked a couple times. I think I haven't really mentioned it on this podcast because this is really the first endeavor we're getting into AI on this podcast, but as Eric already knows, a big portion of my job right now is dealing with AI and addressing it as a part of a task force and a team. And so, like, as I've joked with Eric before, half of my email at this point has become thoughts on AI, and
the other half is written by AI.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting here is that if you look at technology advancement in the past, this same thing happened. So what I point to talking to people is when we first invented the like washing machine, dishwasher, like those two things. If you look at marketing back then, there were advertisements that like the anticipation when this came out was that we would never have to do housework again. That was like the argument that was made back then, right? What actually ended up happening is we started making clothes cheaper and we started buying more clothes. We started buying more dishes. We got more things, and ended up doing more work. We ended up like creating more work for ourselves. So this
All that
thing they
shopping,
found, yeah,
repairing
all
all
the
those broken
shopping,
devices.
yes, repairing all the broken devices, all that stuff. The exact same thing happened. So I find it very interesting that we're already starting to see that happen with AI. That like the gut reaction is to like it'll save us time. And again, this is not to argue that it doesn't, because Eric and I both use AI, and we just spent 20 minutes before this episode talking about our AI. So it's not like we're not using it. But it's interesting how it's affecting things in very similar ways other technology has in the past. We often think technology is going to create utopia, and it often doesn't. It just does more things. But anyway, interesting takeaways. I like the three different personas, if you will, or people that Brooks comes up with. But let's dive a little bit deeper into each one, right? So Brooks talks about the productive passenger, classic Baptist alliteration point. So Brooks says the passenger's great gain and great loss are the same fact stated twice. AI makes tasks easy. Your employer measures the gain, but nobody measures the loss. So what exactly is being lost, and why should we as Christians care about this diminishment that shows up uh, on no performance review? So Eric, why should we care about this? What's being lost here? Why does it matter?
Yeah, I think this is great, and this is the danger for those who see themselves maybe slipping into the productive passenger persona. Is so there are all these gains here, even if indeed you're working in your tools more and you're producing more, and that makes your employer happy. But what is actually lost? What is lost when it comes to your will, your agency? You're bringing your whole self to it, and I think we go in a lot of directions with this. But I'm going to kind of harken back for those who have been with us for some of our last few episodes. One of the themes that has kind of recurred, and especially in our episode with Dorothy Sayers, so to speak, this idea of craftsmanship. She talks in that essay about really kind of the God's call to the workers, firstly to do their work well. And so I think there's no easy answer here, but I think that something that is lost is doing work well, which is not, you can't define the goodness and the quality and the excellence of work and define it as a craft well done simply by the volume of output. Some people do that. I think we would agree that that's short-sighted. It's a kind of reductionistic approach. So what is lost in the process of not fully engaging ourselves with our attention and with mastery? I see myself, even my use of AI. I will produce things that I know that my level of attention and awareness of it is less than what it would have been without the use of AI. Because of that, and we'll get to this in a little bit further on in the episode, I have to implement certain habits or practices to compensate for that, right? So I can thoroughly understand something. I'm not going to send out anything. I'm not going to send out something I've produced or communication that I won't like fully own, even if AI had a role in producing it. And so that speaks to the attention piece. That's, I just kind of use an example of communication, but if you think about a more robust knowledge work, it's all the more important that we are attentive, that it's not just the thing that we make, it's how it's made. And the other thought I'll offer is this in the vein of thinking of work as worship, and especially who we're doing this for, our work for, ultimately God, but but ultimately, but also alongside that for our neighbor. Um, there's a sense in which, and we talked about with a couple of our guests on the episode or the various episodes at this point, that the work itself is part of the offering, right? So the effort that we put into something is also part of the work, right? It's not just what we produce. Then that's another point that Dorothy Sayers made. Uh, so a shortcut around difficulty shortens the offering and it reduces it, um, even if what we what the output is on the other side seems fine and it serves the purpose, right? Our investment, our human involvement and investment, isn't the same, and that is a loss. Now, is that a loss that is unacceptable or can't be compensated for in some ways? I think there are some other thoughts on that. But Josh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this question and maybe what we should do because of it as Christian workers.
Yeah, well, and here's the deal. I think it gets to what you're talking about, right? It's what's lost depends on the purpose of what you're doing, right? So like the as we've talked about before here in the podcast, like the one of the ways we love the people around us is not just through, being nice people, and so it's through excellence, it's through good work. Like you and I talk a lot about like excellence, care, staying on time, like doing all of those things. It's we see it as a way that you love those around you, right? And so what we're doing through our work is something that's not just for ourselves. It's not just to output something. It's not just to create something passable. It's doing something that's worthwhile and excellent for the people around us, and whether that's coworkers, whether that's the people we serve, whether you're whatever scenario you're in, your work is going to somebody else in some way, and the way you do it and how you do it is matters just as much as what you did, right? And so the Pascal risk to get lost in there is that if you're using AI, it's that love component can get missed in those areas, right? So like a practical example would be if you're just like you're not even, I know some people in the AI space who have resulted in the space where like basically they've set up an AI bot to monitor their email, draft responses, and then send them. Okay. Like that feels like it's not exactly loving your neighbor through everything you're doing, right? If all of your emails aren't you responding and you're not giving thought to it, that you lose something in there, right? Now, does that mean you don't use it at all in those spaces? Of course not. I mean, there's some elements of like I think um Brooks talks about this a little bit, I think, but this idea of like difference between like just functional emails you're responding with information versus like things you're crafting versus like memos, relationships. The why behind all of it matters just as much, right? And then I think what's getting lost in there too is that the work itself forms you in many ways. And so like if you're not doing the work, you're also losing that formation, right? If you're not having to think through how to respond to this email in a way that is loving and caring when you really want to respond back with pure as I say it, holy fire in a response back in the email. If you're not having to think through that to a certain degree, like that whole process of thinking through crafting, figuring out what is a charitable way to communicate, that forms your whole thought process of that person and the way you respond. And if you're not doing that, you're just outsourcing that to someone else completely, and there's just no engagement with you. You're not being formed in that way, just as you're not being formed through the effort you're putting in to shape out that project you're working in, or that effort to do the teaching work that you're doing, right? If it's all getting outsourced, you're losing the formation of yourself. And then we talk about this in the education side, you're atrophying in those areas, right? And so this is why education cares a lot about this, because if you're outsourcing what they'll call cognitive outsourcing, if you're outsourcing all of that to AI, you're losing some of the growth and learning that happens in you, and you eventually reach to a point where you can't do those things yourself anymore. And so I think that's some of what's getting lost. Now the pushback I have in this area, it definitely very much matters, in my opinion, the purpose behind what you're doing. Because this is why it's complicated, because to me this looks different depending on the scenario you're in and the situation that you're in. But I can very quickly see what he means by like, you can very quickly kind of just become this passive passenger in the work scenario, and that is not what God intended for work at all. And so if that's what this becomes, we're completely missing the purpose. The purpose isn't about just the end. I've talked about this before. The very practical people, and I'm also somewhat practical in these components, so I can see the desire behind it. But the argument of like the ends justify the means dynamic is often very much in AI, and it's not. The reality is God looks at work and goes, the ends don't justify the means. The process in which you got there justifies the means, in some way. And so like that, if you're completely removed from that, you become just totally passive. As a believer, you're missing the purpose behind the work anyway. Then at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I appreciate your distinction here too, right? This is not an all or nothing. It's not black and white. There are different kinds of work, and so I'll bring in kind of a distinction that the author and professor and computer scientist Cal Newport uses when he talks about the difference between shallow work and deep work. So work that really involves our whole selves, our focus. That's the deep work. That kind of shallow stuff, responding to emails with affirmations or declines or whatnot. That's just one way of looking at this, that there are different kinds of work. And it could be, I think a compelling case could be made. And I think that Josh, you probably even practice this too. If you can outsource certain types of shallow work to AI, then you can actually create more space in your head and in your workday for doing the deep, meaningful work where you are already called to bring your humanity to that space. And so I think I'm meaning to kind of verify or back up what you're saying here too, that there definitely are uses. But we need to make the decisions about that, because the AI chatbots are going to be there to help us with whatever it is that we ask them to do. So really, this becomes a question of what do we, with our own wills and agency, choose to engage it in, because it will try to do it successfully or not, whatever we ask it to do. Yeah.
And very positively. It'll always think your idea is possibly the best thing that's ever happened.
Right. Yes. And we need to be careful of that too. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Affirmation from AI can make mistakes. So anyway, so that's great. So that is the productive passenger, right? How to approach that Christianly. The second persona or AI user type is, again, the reluctant optimizer, right? So just as a reminder, Brooks says the optimizer sees this kind of hollowing out coming, this risk we've just been talking about here, and they resolve in good faith to resist it. But then they get sucked in anyway by the crowded and stressful rush of everyday life. This could be work life. This could be other aspects too. As more and more AI functionality appears on our smartphones, we are potentially cognitively outsourcing a lot of different kinds of engagements and involvement as well. So I think that is probably most of us, I'm going to venture, are in this space where we might be the reluctant optimizer. Like maybe we've not been sucked in yet, at least not in all respects, but this is where the danger is. And so I think I see myself here in this space in some places. But kind of like we have this resolve as reluctant optimizers, but then it kind of collapses in the tyranny of the urgent, right? You can respond with different kinds of techniques to try to resist this. Brooks is going to suggest that we got to do something a little bit more fundamental here. But let's think about this Christianly for a moment. Christians have been dealing with this kind of failed resolve for 2,000 years. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to stay the course. And then it doesn't happen. And this is in matters of faith and spirituality, but also just in matters of decisions here too, which are not inconsequential, because these speak to our character and therefore are connected to our whole beings. So, I mean, if we think about strategies for kind of confronting this reluctant optimizer, we could even say what would it look like to have a rule of life, right? Basically, commitments to particular habits and a way of being and living that could really resist those the danger here of being sucked in the chaos of everyday life, so that we could actually, not necessarily achieve mental marathoners. We'll get to that in a moment, but resist the dangers of the reluctant optimizer. And Josh, you really you live in this space all the time, I think, of figuring out both for yourself and the team that you lead how to approach AI wisely. So I'd love to hear from you. What are some practices either that you have or that you could envision being adopted by individuals to kind of resist the danger of the reluctant optimizer?
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything I like, it's practices. The if there's anything I have, it's a soapbox. But the no, yeah, I think I this one really resonates with me to a certain extent, right? Because it's I can see where I could fall into this very easily, right? Because I do like optimizing. Like I as Eric knows, I work to optimize every function possible. So like I can see that thing. And so I think a lot of this does have to do with setting clear practices for yourself, right? So like um nobody gets their time back, nobody gets what they want automatically. It's not just going to happen. And I think a lot of the fails with technologies that we think, well, if I just do this, I'll get it back. I mean, Eric, how many times have we heard people say it'll just get less crazy next month, right? Or like once we have, or like, because Eric and I have worked on the tech side of things. How many times have we been in meetings where we have heard people go, if we just get this tool, it'll just fix things? Because that's how things work. You buy a thing and then a magic wand happens and it magically fixes everything.
Suddenly our behaviors change.
Yes, all of a sudden that's why humans were behaving the way they were. They didn't have the right tool, clearly.
It wasn't sin, it was the lack of that tool.
Yeah, it was the lack of AI. No. So like you're not just gonna get that back, right? So like setting a rhythm and guidelines for yourselves of like what's okay, what's not okay, right? And so like rest and rhythm is a big part of this, right? So like the problem that often happens of why we end up kind of falling into this kind of reluctant optimizer where you eventually just becoming busier and busier is because we've never dealt with the root problem, which is we've not dealt with understanding why rest exists, why God made it, and set the rhythm and pattern of rest, right? No matter what. Until you do those things, it's not going to matter what tool or scenario you have. You're still going to get overloaded because you're going to just end up doing more. I fight with this on a regular basis somehow because we're like my team's constantly right now thinking through, okay, how do we implement AI in our space? And we've got these two pressing pressures. One, we want to do it because we're being asked to do more, right? And on the other side, we want to do it because we don't have enough time to do the more valuable things we think we should be doing in the courses, right? And so I always feel like we're on this like this knife's edge fight right now of like, if we're not careful, we'll fall into we implement AI and now we just do more. And so some of the things I've been looking at to see is like, okay, first of all, we need to make sure we've got a clear rhythm of rest in place for our team. What does healthy work look like? What is in our words, what is Eric and I would use often, like workload stuff. It's very much kind of like, okay, what is a healthy workload? Okay, we're never gonna schedule anybody fully at 100%, right? You and I lived this, Eric, in the ODL space, trying to make sure that people were always had kind of this buffer in their work, so they had space to think, they had space to innovate, they had space to look at quality on top of the tasks that they were doing. So making those buffers, building those in, and understanding what healthy work looks like. I think the other thing is to make the craftsmanship, the deep work, to pull back from Newport again, make that concrete, right? What does it look like to do good work that's undistracted? What does quality look like, right? Call that out carefully, right? Because if you're not careful about it, you'll quickly move into not pursuing quality and just pursuing more. Because man, if AI is good at anything, it's just pumping out more things, right? And making it sound good and making you believe it looks good, right? And making it look cool until you notice 2 days ago that picture had 7 fingers, right? Like it's you need to define what quality looks like and pursue that and build a rhythm and pattern that protects it. At the end of the day, you need to protect rest and protect quality. And to do that, you need to define what rest and quality look like. And if you do that well, then you create, in my opinion, you create those barriers that can help you slowly from moving into just optimizing everything and throwing those out the window.
Yeah. I think that's great, and I think it ties really well into some practical strategies that Brooks offers himself too. So I'm going to name a couple of these, um, and maybe so we're still talking knowledge work here, but maybe the example could be you have a proposal to prepare, okay, for something that is right within your domain of responsibility. You are the expert, right? But you're also crunched for time, right? And so if you have some of these practices in place where you're saving time for deep work. We've talked here or there about like time blocking, scheduling time, meetings with yourself to do work, those kinds of things. So envision a situation where you've implemented this practice, and then you approach the time where you got to do kind of the initial planning work for this proposal. Here are some ideas that Brooks offers. One is ask for hints rather than answers, right? Okay, so like, what direction might I go, with this, and here's some ways to kind of get at that. One is, and this one's tricky, right? Because it's so easy to open up that window and just make a request or brainstorm something to AI. He suggests starting with a blank page and writing your own analysis, or writing up your own thoughts on this proposal idea before ever opening the bot, right? Okay, so keep that closed. Do this on your own. If you're at a particular place now where your use of AI is such that you're like, oh no, I can't do that. Think about it. Content yourself this way. You can ultimately use that thing with AI to help craft its direction, right? But start with your own mind, right? Think about this for yourself. And then use AI to challenge your thinking. Actually ask it. That's getting back to the hints piece rather than answers. Give it your kind of really drafty proposal and say, what are gaps in this? What are some challenges, some issues? And then rotate. Here's another idea. Rotating AI tasks with tasks that you do unassisted, right? So, and if you go to a task, you're like, all right, I'm going to use AI to help me prepare this thing or draft this response or whatever it might be. Intentionally choose another task then to do that you're not assisted on. Keep kind of diversifying the way you do your work, continue to find those spaces. I think that also can be helpful in identifying where we're best to take the lead and where we can have AI take the lead in something. Again, you have to do that in a disciplined way where you are in charge. But I think that's helpful. And kind of distinguish, and a bit like the shallow work, deep work thing, think about the difference between, like what Brooks says is rote work and creative work, and keep them in separate buckets. The creative work is yours to do. Rote work is something you can give direction to AI to do. And to kind of end this part, Brooks says to treat this AI that you might be using as a brilliant librarian rather than as an oracle, right? Okay, so something that's going to help you find the sources, it's going to help you find the places to go, maybe probe and push back on your ideas, but you're not going to it to get the answers, right? So librarian versus oracle, I think that is also a really, really helpful way to help resist the danger of being in this space where I think many of us are in as a reluctant optimizer.
Yeah, well, and I think because again, you and I talked ahead of time about this. It's kind of like I struggle with these breakups because I always find places where I'm like, if we could nuance it a little bit more, or we could be more careful. Because like there are times where I will go to AI for answers on things, and it's not like made me dumber in what I do or what I've looked at, right? Like I do this quite often, like using AI to find answers out of my own stuff because I don't remember where I put that thing. And it doesn't matter how good I get at this. I'm never going to remember everything I put everywhere. And part of my optimizing has been to optimize that I don't need to, because I want free space in my brain for other things, not that space. And so in those scenarios, I could see where asking for answers out of things and pulling stuff out. I think the key again is going to be setting those boundaries for what is the thing that if you optimized so much that you weren't needed is the problem, right? Like that's the problem, right? If we optimize ourselves so much in responding to things that we no longer have to think about what it means to actually love our neighbor, that's a bit problematic, probably. As Eric, you and I joked, the worst AI example I've ever seen was somebody who tried to use AI to help with discipleship. And I made the joke, I don't think I'm ever going to get to heaven. And Jesus is going to go, good job, my faithful servant, for outsourcing the one job I asked you to do. Like,
Yeah. Yes.
So these are the areas where I think we should create these boundaries and we have to be careful. And understand where we're supposed to pursue, where we're supposed to invest our time, and try to understand and set those boundaries of where are the things that are okay. And the reality is we all have to admit, and like a Brooks, because the dynamic of the article isn't necessarily always going to admit this, or like the conversations I've had with people, we're not going to admit this. We're going to make mistakes through this whole thing. And that's cool. That's fine. I think as long as we're pursuing and moving towards something. And I think this gets at what his mental marathoner idea is, right? So he talks about the marathoner. And the marathoner is clearly the best figure in his essay here. Brooks admires him for good reason, but listen to what he runs for. So basically it's this idea that the marathoner, if again, the example of the car scenario where like a car can drive the marathon length much faster, but people still train. The marathoner is trying to pursue something. He runs for something. And what Brooks argues is he runs for agency, he runs for capacity, he runs for accomplishment, he runs for the struggle, he runs to grow. And work will ultimately reflect his unique self, who he is. He pursues to get that into what he's doing and grow in the process. But here's the reality. We know as believers that the Christian vocation adds a recipient to the work. It's not just about us. It's not just about what we do. Our effort gets spent for somebody, right? Our effort gets spent for our neighbor, loving our neighbor, whether that's directly servicing a neighbor, or as we've talked about before on this podcast. Ultimately, the work we do goes into a larger culture of things that is, if we have a good biblical view of it, it's for the people that we live around. It's for the people we're a part of. It's for the earth, the creation, everybody. God has this purpose for work. So, Eric, I'm curious, with this marathoner idea in mind, what changes about the marathon when the finish line isn't just you, it's your neighbor?
Oh man, this is a great question. And yeah, it gets at, I'm torn in this, right? Because so I think he kind of hates this from some of the things I've read and heard. But David Brooks, a lot of his writing, including this essay, kind of falls into kind of the self-help space, like how to become a better person, right? Which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But we're looking at this from another lens. So, Josh, you've kind of indicated a bit of a critique here. So mental marathoner, the concept is a great one, that we're going to put in the effort. We're going to do the work that we could potentially outsource to AI, and it might do it just as well, but we don't want to experience the loss that the productive passenger does, right? So we're going to do the effort. We're going to put the time in. We're going to get the work done. But it is for kind of yourself, right? And it this part of the article was, I think, kind of the weakest one. It sort of it dropped off, and maybe this is because I'm expecting things of the essay and Brooks that I shouldn't be.
Or we don't run marathons. That could also be part of the.
That could be part of it as well, right? Yes. If I was a marathoner, I might be able to say, "Oh, well, actually, I'm doing this for others." I mean, obviously, there's marathons for charity and all that. We're not picking apart the example that far, but your point here that there's a neighbor that we're doing this our work for should shape how we approach this. It's a motivating factor that Brooks doesn't address. And again, and this is not to be overly critical of him. He had another purpose in mind with just differentiating these types. I think what we're trying to do here is actually take these as an example and think about them in a distinctly Christian way. How does it relate to faith and work in this age of AI? So having the love of neighbor as a motivation here should help us at least desire to resist falling into that productive passenger role, because somebody else receives the benefit of our work. It even is what we're called to do. I mean, you mentioned
Mhm.
the example of AI discipleship and all that. Yes, this is what we're commanded to do. This is the Great Commission: go and make disciples. Can we leverage AI in our obedience to the commission? I think so.
Yeah.
But handing that responsibility off and saying, "Oh, don't worry, there's a bot for that. They're handling it." That's not where we should be going here. Not only because we can't sort of trust the end result there, because it might look great. We might come up with a great plan of action for, you know, spiritual improvement. Um, but as human beings, we're called to do the work, to be engaged. We're called to love God and love our neighbor, and
Mm.
we need to walk. I think we need to discern very carefully where we can utilize AI to help us in that aim, and where we're phoning it in by using AI in its place. And so the quality of our work, of our contribution to the work, I should say, maybe the output in some cases might not look very different, but it's the
Mhm.
process, the journey that's formative for us, for our neighbor, for our display of the glory and the grandeur of God, through of honoring Him, in an act of gratitude, for calling us into His family. Um, so I think that is definitely a missing piece, in the essay here, and it's something that, it's a motivating factor and a destination or a purpose or a target, really,
Mhm.
for our work, that is, maybe more helpful than thinking about this as
Mm.
a self help kind of exercise. Josh, I'd love to hear though from your aspect too. What else? Maybe where can we help Brooks out if he was speaking to us as an audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the for me it comes down to similar things. It's the when so I was talking about this before when we were talking about this idea, which is that like being in this space where I'm having to constantly, pretty much every day at this point, consider AI and think through it, whether it's how my team works with it or it's institutionally for our whole organization, thinking through things. I've been reading a ton of articles and a ton of books on the topic, and some of my own finding, and others sending to me through email, either to share an opinion that they feel is different than what I'm doing. But well, no matter what it might be, I'm reading a lot of articles in this space, and what I've been finding is, and I think this is an interesting dynamic for us as believers, is that like the more people write about AI and write about it in its engagement with work, we're being forced as a society in a way we haven't probably in a while to answer the question of why we work, right? Going back to our last episode, why we work. And almost all of these articles, to a certain degree, when they're not thinking in a robust theological perspective, they end up falling in sort of kind of the like, I the way I said it to you, Eric, is kind of the okay cool feeling. It's like, okay cool, we're supposed to do this for our own capacity and our accomplishment. That's fun. Like but like it always feels a little flat. Like it's like, okay,
Mhm.
that, yes, that's all beneficial, that's not untrue, I actually agree very much with that, but the whole point is that vocation has a bigger purpose. It's not
Calling.
just about
It's in there in
yourself,
the
it's a
word too.
calling. We've talked
Yeah.
about this before, it's a calling. And that calling involves down to the DNA of the impact to creation itself, that we're created for that purpose, right? That our work does something. It's something is made of it, whether it's culture, whether it's family, whether it's friends, no matter what it might be. Our work builds something beyond just a product and beyond just ourselves. It builds a community, it builds a healthier culture, it builds friendships, it helps people, right? Our work does things beyond all of that. And so for me, like, when you're missing that component, it just, work can still fall into something to be like, okay, yeah, sure, AI can do it, right? If it's just for money, if it's even just to become better, like, what's the purpose of becoming better? not just to be a better person, not just to be those things. It's because in doing that, we actually change and impact the world around us. And we see that work becomes this beautiful thing that we get to be a part of and do. And so then for me, outsourcing AI becomes less of like, should we do it? And it becomes more of like, we just shouldn't want to do it. We should want to see how AI can help us achieve that better, no matter what. And then anything else that doesn't get to us being a part of that and takes us out of that should be something we avoid. And this is the thing that's missing in the. I'm about to go on a soapbox. I promise I'll leave in a second. This is the thing that's missing in the entire AI movement. Is that like AI in its core? You look at OpenAI, you look at Anthropic, you look at all of those companies. It's almost like the unwritten rule is we want to get ourselves out of work. But the problem is when
not the Christian view.
Yes, it's not the Christian view. When we do that, we're missing out on this incredibly beautiful part of God's story that we get to be a part of. And so what are we going to do? We're going to outsource what God literally put us here for to something else. See, that's such an unbeautiful picture in comparison to what God is actually doing, that once you really understand that, it's not just about running a marathon. It's about doing something much bigger than that. And that's maybe where this falls short a little bit for me, is if it's just about running a marathon, if it's just about working harder for growth's sake, man, that sounds really tiring. like that kind of sounds exhausting. And so like if it's just that, like, oh man, it's still not as compelling as the picture that really what God gives, which is this bigger, brighter picture of you get to participate in something so much bigger than just you, that like even the smallest thing you do, down to the little beautiful Excel sheet you created, can change the environment and the culture of the people around you. And when you look at that, that's where you get like really cool teams and environments that get created out of that are like, and we've experienced this ourselves being on a team that was similar to this dynamic, where like it's not even just the work that gets to be the enjoyed part. It's just purely the experience of being a part of what's going on. And that's something worth pursuing. And if we're outsourcing that to AI, that's why we're like, you're just missing out on something so much bigger. So okay, I'm off my soapbox now. There's my.
All right, well, Rev Josh, thank you for that. That was great. We should just move on from there. I have nothing to add, though total agreement. The danger, maybe I will say this: the danger, right, is that of outsourcing our call. Really, the danger is to outsource our call and to fail to be obedient and to live lesser lives because of that. Right. So I think that's great. So now in defense of Brooks, right, after beating up on him a little bit here, in defense of him briefly, and I'll just let you speak to this, Josh, he lands his essay in an interesting place. I didn't expect it to go because of how practical or pragmatic much of the article is. He says that one thing that AI can't do is, just stop right there for a moment. What is he going to say? Brooks said that AI can't hunger because a bot has, to quote him, Brooks, no structure of cares and an order of loves as a person does, end quote. Then he says that the task is to educate people to be clear about what they truly love. And he leaves open where the ordering comes from. We've just begun to speak to that a little bit. We think we know, right? We've started to talk about this already. So if our loves are what make us human and the ordering of them is what makes us Christian, St. Augustine there for folks in the know, what does staying both Christian and human look like at a desk on Monday morning? So Josh, over to you, kind of like pulling this all together practically now, but thinking from the perspective of what AI cannot do. It cannot desire, it cannot love, and it certainly cannot channel those in an orderly fashion as God has given us. What does that look like to strive to stay both Christian and human at the desk on Monday morning?
Yeah, so this is where like if we're talking, I hate to use plane metaphors because we make fun of them all the time. But I'm going to use one for a hot second. If we're talking like landing the plane with Brooks, for me, like the mental marathoner was kind of the plane just kind of lost a little bit of air. And then he lands with a statement, AI doesn't hunger. And it was like he basically pulled the entire plane back up, and we were soaring again. I would sing a song from Aladdin, but I won't do that. But we're back up, right? And for me, what I think is so intriguing about this is, like, you and I were talking about this, Eric. Everybody wants to talk about what AI is missing, right, in this conversation. Like, right, we I've talked about it now on the other podcasts I do. We're up to 260 something episodes, and we counted the other day, and I think we're hitting close to 60 AI episodes at this point. And like, I feel like every other episode we're talking about, like, what does AI not achieve, right? Like, what does AI not do? And it's always kind of like this ubiquitous, like, kind of vague soullessness that we talk about, right? Whether it's it generating music, whether it's the images that it makes, whether it's the text that it writes by itself, like, it's missing something, right? And I think Brooks kind of really starts to get to it, which is that it doesn't, as he puts it, hunger. It doesn't desire. It doesn't know its purpose. It doesn't have a purpose. Like, it doesn't have motivation and joy and all of that wrapped into one. It doesn't really understand why it's doing what it's doing beyond that it was asked to do it.
It doesn't
Right?
have a
And
vocation.
so, yes, it doesn't have a calling. It doesn't have a vocation. It's missing that purpose behind it, that drive behind it. And because of that, everything it does purely on its own is going to be missing. It's going to be a hollow echo of something that does. Right? This is where we fall short in creating AI. God created humanity and indwelled in it his own image. We created AI and we indwelled in it the mass writings from the internet. Okay? It's not the same.
Our image.
Yes, our image, but like a bad one. Like,
yes.
You couldn't even do hands, folks. Okay, like, for the longest time, it's missing that thing, and so because it's missing that thing, for me, the first thing is going to be, if we just outsource all key work to this AI tool, we become that passive person. What's going to end up happening is more soulless, purposeless things get put out into the world, right? And that doesn't achieve what God's looking for, which is that our work makes something of the world. It makes it better. It builds culture. It builds relationships. It builds joy. It builds surprise. It builds that story that just you will never forget, right? It's all of that stuff is because purpose, experience drove all of it. And it's in that human experience that God built in that image display that is unreplicable by anything else. And it's in a way, while Brooks doesn't say this part to a certain extent, he's just itching on the surface of that, in my opinion, which is that, like, it's that drive, it's that need, it's that hunger to see the world different than it was yesterday. It's that hunger to enjoy family. It's that hunger to enjoy the experience. It's that hunger to just do that one thing slightly better than you did it yesterday. It's all of that wrapped into one that drives what we do, right? And it's that calling. So, right, like, in my opinion, this work is worship idea, it answers this idea that Brooks kind of leaves open, which he says we need to order our loves. And man, it's like he almost another author of ours favor. It's almost like he just like pulled Jamie Smith out of the out of the sideline and pulled him in this moment, right? We need to order our loves. And so the whole premise being that, like, for us as believers to interact well with AI, we need to order what is our purpose. What is what we're doing? What is it that we care about? What is it that we love? And for Eric and I think that's a lot of what drives the work that we do, is continually trying to push ourselves to look at work as not just something we do. It's not just something to get a paycheck. It's not just something to push out more product. It's not just something to get, in my case, get more students in the door. It's to change the world around us in a way that reflects the image of the most perfect thing that could ever exist, which is God. And so in reflecting and in living out that purpose. And so if we order that as being our driving force, right, to make the world around us, the people around us, a better place, a more a place that reflects God more. If we build that order, and make that our first goal, that itself will help us even as we engage with AI to figure out what is the use or not, right? Because that starts to make the picture clearer in my mind.
Mm-hmm. And if I could just add too, I agree with everything you said there. Um, I think Brooks, for those who haven't read Jamie Smith or haven't read Augustine, they may struggle with this whole like ordering loves, ordering desires things a little bit. But I think it really comes home for us in this conversation here. If we have properly ordered our loves, if we are desiring the right things in the right order, well, who defines that order of things? It's God, right? And what is at the top there? Obviously, love of God, right, and love of our neighbor all flows from that. What are we desiring in that midst? What we're desiring is the kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the kingdom of God, as we pray in the Lord's Prayer, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we are looking for the coming kingdom. And while we wait, and so that we play, and as we play our meager part in God's redemptive work in the world, it is that we would kind of evoke his kingdom in our work through how we do our work as much as what we do in our work. And that's our
Mm.
calling. That's our vocation. This is the point you've been making, Josh. We're called to this, to steward creation, to love our neighbor. And so whether we use AI or not, how much we use AI, where we use it in our work needs to be governed by our ultimate desires.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% agree that that's the desires and what we put in there is a core element of what we do and how we do it, and drives what we do. So if I could recap just a little bit, right? The passenger trades capacity for ease and never sees the invoice, never sees the end. The optimizer means well but loses on volume. Maybe pumped it just a little too high and destroys the ears. And the marathoner runs on purpose. But the open question really is, Eric. I mean, it's who is the marathoner running for?
Yeah, yeah. And so, like we did last time, kind of like to close out our time together, let's think about this. So here's what David Brooks leaves on the table. He says that the one thing artificial intelligence cannot do is hunger. Just been talking about that. A bot, in his words, does not have a structure of cares and an order of loves as a person does. If he's right, then what is under pressure at your desk is not only your intelligence, it's your loves. The inbox, the deck, the analysis nobody read, the meeting you almost skipped. That may be where your loves get trained all week, one small choice at a time. Brooks says the task before us is to teach people to be clear about what they truly love. He does not say where that clarity comes from. Again, and we've said here that we think it comes from worship, it comes from scripture, it comes from Sabbath, from confession, from the ordinary company of the people who want what we want, our faith community. Every one of those is really workplace equipment, we could say. So here's our ask for you this week. Take one piece of the work that matters to you. Before you open the bot, take a blank page and write down what you actually think. Just 5 minutes, right? Then bring the machine in to argue with you rather than to answer you. One task, one blank page, see what it costs you and see what it gives back.
Nobody sat you down on your first day at work, first day at the desk, and told you to stay Christian, except for right now. Nobody told you you need to stay human either. But consider this your talk, okay? Students are about to start school. You're about to go back to work on whatever you might be at work at this moment. This is the talk, okay? And we'll see you next time on FaithWorks Lancaster Conversations on Calling.